So this is the first episode of this series. If you are seeing this on YouTube, I am personally quite surprised because the point of this is not to actually make it for release. This is the test run. It's a fantastic pop song, and it's the kind of song where if someone were to say to me, Uptown Funk, cover, I'd be like, nah, I'm alright. Yes, the video is done, and I'm actually really happy with it. But far and away, the biggest problem for me has been how long this whole process has taken. It took 2 years. But if you're making a music video with it, you don't just have the mechanical copyright, you have the synchronization. Basically, if I can afford it, you'll see this Uptown Funk video, and if I can't, you won't. Hi, and welcome to the channel. In this video series, I do 3 things. 1, arrange and record music in my home studio, in this narrowboat on the Thames. 2, plan and shoot music videos for that music. And 3, document how it went, what worked, and what didn't. The previous episode was the pilot. This is episode 1. I'm James Bell, and this is the process. Me. This is not the track I was hoping to do now. For me, the point of this video series is really to do cover versions. It's to do songs that other people have heard of. I was planning on doing traditional songs from the beginning because I'm kind of obsessed with them. And I was planning on throwing in some of my own songs too at some point. But certainly not to start off with. But I'm kind of stuck at the moment. From when I first came up with this video series idea, I knew which song I wanted to start off with, and that is The Boy in the Bubble by Paul Simon. It just felt like a perfect introduction. It felt like, well, it's the song that kicks off his legendary 1980s album, Graceland. And it's about the wonder and the horror of the modern world. It was written in the 1980s. I feel like it's dated about 8 seconds. Such a great song. I was starting to kind of put together all these ideas of how I might cover it. But yeah, then I tried to get the copyright, and the company came back and said, essentially like, what's your upper limit? And I told them what the upper limit is. And they were like, yeah, okay, well, how about that, but 20% more? And I was like, I can't do that. Like, you know, it takes time to get these rights set up, and I don't have another option, and I can just wait around for weeks, months, however long it takes to get the next one and the next one, the next one. Or I can just get started. So I picked one of my own songs, which is not a million miles away in tone from The Boy in the Bubble. It's called Already On to the Next Thing. I wrote it a bit before the pandemic. It was written about my sense of a kind of generational disconnect of the older generation, like my generation, just not really accepting that the world is on fire. I'm not so worried about the actual music video side of things, but actually that's just because I feel like the problem of recording the track is the bigger challenge. I already did a version of it. I'll play a bit in a minute because I don't need to worry about the sound recording copyright. I'll explain why, but I wasn't happy with it. I don't think I did it very well. And part of the reason is that the song is about being frustrated that we're still doing the same old ideas that clearly don't work. We need a new approach. It's about the kind of the hunger for just something that's new. But if you want to express that in music, there's there's kind of an implied boast in that, which is like, oh yeah, I'm following all the new stuff. You guys are all just stuck in the past. If I'm making a song about, come on, new things, please, I have to deliver on that promise in the music myself. Like the music has to sound new to me. And that is a big challenge because for me, it has to sound new, but as ever, it has to be distinctive. It has to be coherent, and it has to sound good in a non-intellectual way. Again, as I said in the pilot video, I can just get a piano and go blah, 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 and make some noises no one's made before. Except for maybe the Muppets. The Muppets might have made those noises I just made. But like, it will just be noise. It won't be something I find interesting. It's not about new sounds. It's about new ideas. All right, just got in. I thought I'd give a little bit more context about this song and how it came about. I wrote this in, having had a look at it, 2018, as part of an attempt to overcome this writer's block, which I have had for a long time and I'm still kind of grappling with. I realized the last music that I wrote myself and put online was 10 years ago. And the last 10 years, most of my energy was taken up with adapting traditional music for playing in bands or doing commercial music, doing production music. And during that time, I came up with more and more and more ideas and kind of meta ideas for my own songs and tunes. So many ideas that it just became kind of an incoherent mess. So I came up with this approach where I was going to try and write an original song and adapt an original song or tune every month and then put them online at the end of the month. And this song was part of that. I don't think any of the either original songs or traditional songs that I did during that time are particularly good. They all, to me, feel kind of underdeveloped, and a whole month for doing just two doesn't sound like it's a huge amount of work. Adapting traditional stuff is just way more time consuming than writing your own material. I also need to write it, perform it, record it, mix it, master it. Those things add up. So I think what I'm going to do in a second is play the version that I did of this song through the speaker and just kind of roast it for your entertainment. But first, I need to put on some coffee and clear up all these children's toys. This is actually a dog toy, but maybe this can be our little secret. By the way, for complicated reasons, I can't actually include the music video in this episode, but there will be a link to it at the end. If you want a sneak peek now, or if you'd like to learn even more about how it was made, there's links in the description. Anyway, on with the show. Coffee number 5 today, I think. All right, so this is the track I did before. I'll play it. I'll play it first, and then I'll probably pick it apart. And I'm just going to play a bit of it. So.
How long's it been now? There's the same notification on my screen now. We've been back and forth and everywhere between now. You're still keen now. Listen, please stop trying to drag me back to 2017 now. It's over, it's done. I'm already on to the next thing. And then I say this.
I kind of like the way the drums start. This riff, I thought it would be a good idea to have a keyboard bass and an acoustic guitar. It just sounds incoherent to me now. Like the two don't particularly go together well. They're contrasting sounds. Combining them doesn't sort of fit the emotion of the song. The main vocal, badly sung, I think. Vocals kind of get better as the track goes on. But again, everything about it feels sort of obvious to me. And I don't want to be super avant-garde on this. For me, it always comes back to these three things. These tracks need to be distinctive, be coherent, sound good in a non-intellectual way. They don't need to be like wildly innovative. Distinctive is enough for me. But they do need to be coherent. This feels completely incoherent. This feels rushed. And I don't think it sounds particularly good intellectually. But I do think that there's a track that I could really like in here. I just need to kind of clean all the dust off, I guess. Okay, so like I mentioned, the first version of this track I recorded a few years ago. And in that time when I thought about how I would come back to it, I felt like, all right, I sort of jumped in blind. It's all very well to want to do something that sounds new, but I still need some kind of reference. I need to get a sense of what kind of emotion am I trying to create? And really a great starting point is like, who else has done something similar? And the track that I felt like would be a good reference track for this is a track from a movie. It's the first Miles Morales Spider-Man movie. There's a scene, the kind of leap of faith scene, where he leaps off a building and first discovers how to be Spider-Man. It's got this track underneath called What's Up Danger, and the energy of this scene, the leap of faith scene, I just felt like, all right, that's a good starting point. What about jumping between different sounds, like jumping between different drum kits? An analog drum kit in a particular room, just like a real drum kit, and then drum machine, and then some other kind of samples, some sort of found sound kit or something, and it just leaps between them in that slightly multiverse way where realities keep just kind of shifting into different gears. Quick little point. Remember at the beginning when I said that I couldn't get the copyright for The Boy in the Bubble? Yeah, I don't think I'd done enough research. There's a platform that's got Boy in the Bubble. It seems like it's a fairly straightforward thing. So yeah, I will do that soon, hopefully. I was thinking, oh, okay, if it's possible, do I kind of stop doing what? No. I'm already on to the next thing. Let's see it to the end. The last one took 2 years, for God's sake. Okay, so I'm starting to go in and polish the track. And as I'm doing it, I feel kind of painfully aware of the fact that this doesn't sound new. You know, when you've been recording for many years, you develop all kinds of shortcuts based on, you know, your childhood heroes that turn into cliches, that turn into really dated cliches. But I'm also aware of the fact that one of the realities of, I think, any kind of creative project, particularly the music that I do, is that it's not going to sound great the whole time. And I've just got to put up with the fact that there are going to be parts that don't work, and I need to approach them a small chunk at a time, and then I can deal with those parts when I get to them. That said, I thought, okay, like, what does actually sound new to me? When was the last time that I heard a kind of sound that was like, oh wow, that really to me does sound like not just a new sound, but a new sound with a philosophy. Now, my music tastes are not infinitely broad, so a lot of it's going to depend on what I happen upon. But the last time I felt that was with hyperpop, and particularly with the band 100 Gex. And I thought, oh yeah, okay, that's at least something to listen to in the background for this track. The other person, or actually people, who have really made an impression on me in terms of a new sound are Billie Eilish and her brother Phineas. And actually, there's kind of a similarity in the 100 Gex and Billie Eilish sound in that it's quite stripped down, it's programmed sounds rather than analog instruments, and it's really compressed. And they do interesting things with kind of making the sound dirtier. They approach it in different ways, and sometimes they approach it in the same way. So yeah, those are going to be some things I'm going to add to my playlists and just have a bit of a listen to. And as I say, just kind of try and keep in the back of my mind. As I was adding them to the playlist, I was like, oh, wait a minute, I forgot the person who for me has for a long time been the most interesting figure in British music, which is Little Simz. So yeah, that's someone else I should definitely add to that kind of sonic landscape for this track. All right, we are well into the cold season now. And the track is finished, the audio is finished. I might go in and tweak it a little bit more, but I think it's done. And that is kind of an achievement, because I did say that there was this big challenge with the track, that it needs to sound fresh to my ears at least. So yeah, I was kind of thinking like, am I gonna be happy with this track when it's done? But I think the key thing I've been holding on to is this idea of it needs to sound distinctive. It doesn't need to reinvent the wheel. So I mentioned I had a kind of disparate array of reference tracks I was working to. There was that What's Up Danger track from the Spider-Man to the Spider-Verse film. 100 gecs, the sort of hand crushed by a mallet sound. Billie Eilish, I guess, bad guy, all the good girls go to hell sort of aesthetic. And Little Sims, who I sort of wondered, does she fit in with the kind of aesthetic of those previous ones? In a way, it was leaning more into the kind of Little Sims sound that gave me the thing that satisfied me, that this track sounds fresh. Basically, the fact that I was at a point where I was wanting to add new parts to make it sound kind of unique and unusual and, you know, whatever else, it was a bit of a sign of desperation, really. That if you keep having to add new weird stuff to make it sound distinctive, you're not doing it because it's serving what the kind of emotion of this track. You're doing it just to kind of sound clever. Now, it doesn't need new parts. It needs something that's going to tie the whole sound together. It needs to sound like it's all in a space, and that space needs to fit the mood and it needs to be interesting. And I thought, what space should it be in? And I just felt like it should be in a small room. It should be claustrophobic. Now, this is a track which is kind of expanded partly from the kind of What's Up Danger, it's like the orchestral sound, into having a string section and a horn section, like orchestral horn section. It's a big kind of sound. And I like the idea of it all sounding like it's in a room where you literally physically couldn't fit that many musicians. So it's kind of deliberately a contradiction. It just sounds compressed. It sounds, yeah, claustrophobic, I think was the word that sort of interested me. I started playing around with it. I thought, yeah, I kind of like the sound of that. I just put a reverb on all of the tracks. And I was like, yeah, now I'm going to go in and just like craft it on each track. And that's going to be the thing that makes it sound distinctive. And that ended up sounding a lot more like the kind of Little Sims, for example, a track like Point and Kill, which just, you know, it sounds like it's all recorded in a room, rather than, say, the Billie Eilish sound of everything is like right up against the speaker. You don't really get a sense of it happening in a space. It's kind of happening out there in like the ether, which is a great sound. It's just not what I wanted for this, as it turned out. I didn't know until I started playing around with that. I mean, I can now hear influences of all the tracks I mentioned, but not sort of in the way that I was thinking. All right, I'm in the middle of recording the audio, but I'm already starting to think about video ideas. Now, I mentioned at the beginning that I felt like the big challenge was going to be making the audio track, making the actual music sound new. And I hadn't really wrapped my head around what I was going to do for video ideas. Cut to today, when I'm trying to put something on TV to just relax the 2-year-old. One thing that always works a treat, but that I've massively overplayed, is all of the music videos of OK Go. She is just entranced, and fair enough, they're amazing. But they're kind of overplayed. So I thought, okay, who else does great music videos? And I thought, Michel Gondry, one of the filmmakers who just defined music videos in the 90s and 2000s. And so I found a playlist and I put the videos on. And as I was watching them, I was thinking, you know what? I should take some of the Michel Gondry kind of DIY aesthetic and I should use it for the Already Onto the Next Thing video. It'd be nice to kind of stretch out from just doing green screen and then try and do something more ambitious. I realized I end up making quite a few of these little clips where I'm making a note of something that occurred to me and then immediately I think, no, that would be a terrible idea. And it really would be a terrible idea because Michel Gondry is a trap for someone like me. Like, you can look at his video and everything looks like it's made out of toilet roll. And you think, oh yeah, I could do that, but I couldn't. Because either he took like 12 days to make each thing, or he had a team of people. It's painstaking, it's detailed, everything's in camera, but that's more difficult. Like, there's no VFX or whatever, which I can't do, but I'm not going to be able to do the other stuff either. So what this really made me realize is when it comes to making videos, now that I'm starting to think about it, I need to make lack of technical difficulty the first thing that I think about. Like, before I think about what emotion am I trying to convey in the music video, before I think about like what would be a good overall sort of theme and, you know, what will the visuals look like, it's got to be, can I achieve it? And it's a big mistake for me to think I should step outside of doing green screen stuff. Doing green screen on the boat, the thing is I can control the environment completely. As soon as I step out here, everything becomes more complicated. I need to think about who's operating the camera. I need to think about lighting. I need to think about, is someone going to move me on from this public place where I'm filming? It might be the case that I can do some filming outside the boat, but I really think that I need to start with the limitations and work within them. And then maybe at some point I can hire a team to help me. But until then, yeah, just keep it simple. Okay, so I'd accepted the fact that it makes sense to just stick with green screen. Don't try and make things more complicated. And of course, as soon as I'd accepted that, my brain started thinking, all right, but if I wasn't going to do green screen, what could I do? I mean, could I, for example, do, I don't know, something with movement, something like just a single take of me walking along and having like a drone film me, but then the drone would need to be in front of me, so that might not work. Could I, again, just do a single take walking and have one of those like action cameras on the end of a stick that wipes the stick out? I could rent one of those, I guess. I was thinking that and thinking, well, you're dealing with like outside light and you've got to perform and film and do all the logistics of that. It's doable, but, you know. And that got me thinking, all right, okay, well, where should this take place? Like, where is the conversation of the song taking place? And I thought, well, it's kind of in a meeting. I think that's what I always imagined. So I guess it should kind of be in like a boardroom or something. But then again, you're static, you're locked down. There's no, how do you get a sense of movement? And then I thought, no, wait a minute. It's not in a boardroom. It's a meeting, but it's not in a boardroom. It's in a car. Okay, so with the car footage shot, it's now a case of putting it into Final Cut Pro, starting to edit the music video and thinking about what the backdrop's going to be behind the car. For that, I'm using generative AI art. I'm using Midjourney to generate images, and I'm using Pika Labs to animate those. Now, I'm actually going to talk much more about this whole generative AI process that I've been dipping my toe, kind of jumping in head first to. I'm going to talk about it in much more depth in the next episode, in the song Young Man Cut Down on His Prime. It's just more efficient for me to make two of these episodes at the same time. So I've been working on them both, and for reasons, I ended up doing the Young Man Cut Down on His Prime first. This one I'm kind of finding, already onto the next thing, I'm kind of finding more challenging because I'm running up against the limitations of Midjourney a bit more. But again, I'm going to talk about that in the next episode because there's a lot to talk about, and to a certain extent, making both of these music videos has been kind of the same process. One thing that I will say though is I've been very cautious taking on this whole The Process project about overextending when it comes to music videos, about thinking of an idea, getting stuck into it and just realizing it's way more complex and way more out of my skill set than I thought. I'm already starting to feel that I'm actually building up some muscles here. I'm learning how to do filmmaking, and I'm incrementally taking on more and more challenging things, which is what I was worried I would do, and then would just take way longer than I should do. Actually, I'm kind of feeling like it's okay at the moment, and generative AI is playing a big part in that. But it's also full of thorny ethical issues and probably pretty soon legal issues too. So, as I say, I'll talk about that more in the next month. Yeah, video finished literally last night. This was a challenge. I mentioned before that I worked on this episode and the next episode at the same time. And I also mentioned that for reasons, I did the next one first, Young Man Cut Down on His Prime. And that's because I thought that was going to be much more difficult. I brainstormed both of them and thought, okay, how is the video going to work? What are the themes going to be? What's the basic narrative going to be? And I looked at the two of them and I thought, Young Man Cut Down on His Prime is just trickier. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get that work. Actually, and I'll obviously talk more about that in the next one, it was kind of a delight, and I was really amazed with the results that I got. With already on to the next thing, I mean, for example, when I started generating the videos from the Midjourney images that I'd made, I got the results back and I was like, I don't think this is usable. I think the quality is just not there. And these videos are rough around the edges, and I'll talk more about that in a bit, but there's rough around the edges, and then there's just so kind of janky, it's distracting, and that's what I thought I was going to get. But I just did it again and again and again, and did loads and loads of different takes, loads of different generations, loads of, whatever. And then after a while, weirdly, Pika Labs, the software that I was using, I think started to figure things out. So for example, as you'll see in the video, I'm generating the backdrops behind the car, and sometimes two things are moving in different directions. The car is moving in one direction, and then there are planes moving in another direction. Pika couldn't figure that out to begin with. But as I started doing it, after a while, I think it's sort of whatever algorithm is working got the sense that, oh, okay, if there's a road, he wants it going in this direction. And if there's a plane, he wants it going in that direction. And I had to kind of isolate bits of them and then say, this plane is moving from the left frame to the right frame, and kind of educate it like that. And after a while, it seemed like it was like, oh, okay, I kind of get the hang of that. So that was one challenge. Then when I started putting things into Final Cut Pro and actually making the video, I thought this just looks so unrealistic. Like, maybe I can get away with it looking a bit kitsch, that the inside of the car looks so different to the outside of the car. But gradually, and here's where I feel like years of recording music, recording audio in digital audio workstations has really helped, as I was able to kind of apply the same principles I'd use in that, of checking references and saying, well, how should it look? And they're saying, all right, well, maybe it needs this and maybe it needs this. And then just layering them in very gently so that you hopefully don't notice them, but they all add up to a more cohesive picture. So there was a lot of that. And then, at the end of it all, there was just a lot of going through the entire music video and having to fix things frame by frame. If I was going to do it again, I'd really pay attention to where my thumbs were on the steering wheel, because that and masking out the background kept interfering with each other, and I just had to kind of mask my thumb into the shot all the way through. Ducks. I think we're safe. So yeah, it was a challenge. It was a lot more work in the end than Young Man Cut Down on His Prime. Okay, well, let's actually get down to it. Let's ask the question. I think it all came together in the end, but I'm not entirely sure. Something that I realized when it was finished is that I went into this with really high expectations, and I set myself the challenge of doing something that was just new and fresh. And I'm not sure whether or not I achieved that. I'm not sure whether or not I'm going to come back and think, it's fine. Because I've had my head down and been focusing on it, I don't have that perspective. I don't know how I'm going to feel about it coming back to it. I may sort of think, oh, wow, it works a lot better than I thought it did, which I often feel. I may come back and be like, God, you missed this thing and this thing, which is just dragging it down. But at the moment, I feel like when I think about all the things I was trying to achieve beforehand, I look at it and I'm like, yeah, I feel like I hit that beat. I feel like I hit that beat. And ultimately, when it comes to doing something new and something fresh, I feel like there's still a sort of a story, a narrative in the song, and I need to tell that. And I'm kind of restricted by that to a certain extent. You can make the choice to say, all right, screw the narrative, just do something wild and crazy. And that's fine, but that's not what I'm trying to do in this song, or most of the time, really. Like, the story takes precedence. Something else that I'm wondering about. I've talked a bit about AI here. I'm going to talk a lot more about AI, and particularly the sort of legal and ethical implications in the next episode. But I will say, I found Midjourney to be such a useful tool, but I'm worrying about how much it's possible for me to take it on myself to avoid ripping other people off. So for one shot, I was editing the sky full of aeroplanes, and I generated a few different Midjourney images with kind of different prompts. And when I got them together and was, looking between them for various reasons, I realized that chunks of them were exactly the same. You could take them and just copy them and paste them on, but the prompts were different. And it did make me think, is that just the algorithm? I was like, I know how to do a bunch of planes. Or has it just found someone else's photo with a bunch of planes and be like, this works, I'm going to copy and paste it. From the perspective of being a creator, if Midjourney is going to do that, I can't really rely on it. Finally, in terms of what went badly, there's the same old thing if it just took ages. But actually, that leads into the next point. I feel like I'm starting to make peace with how long these episodes take. It's going to take as long as it's going to take. It's just fun, though. I really enjoy doing it, and so I think it would be more of a sweat if I felt like, oh God, I'm not happy with it. I'm not happy with the results that I'm getting. For me, this is about capturing the joy of the creative process of making stuff. And I enjoy looking back at them when I edit it and put it all together. I'm like, yeah, I like the vibe. So yeah, that's where we're at. There we go. Using my sophisticated lighting technology, I've closed the curtain a bit. I just want to say thank you for making it all the way to the end, assuming you did make it all the way to the end. And if you just jumped in for the ending video, that's fine too. I'm going to finish up with one last point that I only noticed when editing. You might be lost out on a post-apocalyptic highway. You might be chased by terrifying feral gangs, or you might be trapped in some kind of twisted simulation of the Cotswolds, but still, you should really wear a seatbelt. Already on to the next thing. Let's watch the video.